Welcome, Real Talkers, to another episode of Mortgage Monday. I'm David Green, your host, joined with Christian Batchelder of The One Brokerage, the founder, co-owner, and broker of the company along with me. And we are going to be talking about all things Trump. Okay, we're not going to be talking about all things Trump, but he has been elected as the president of the country. And we are going to be talking about how his economic plan specifically could impact mortgages. So if you want to know what to expect going into 2025 and how the mortgage market is likely to respond, you are in the right place. Christian, welcome to another episode of Mortgage Monday. How are you today?
I'm doing good. The Trump talk coming at you live on a Monday here.
Trump talking. All right. Before we get into it, I'm just curious. I sometimes will start our episodes off by asking the question, how many loans do you have in submission right now?
Still going strong. Obviously, right after the election, interest rates got a little crazy beforehand there. They've settled down a little bit, but we're company wide. I think we're around 220, 230. Me personally, as an LO, I'm right around 60 right now. So still pretty good volume for us as a brokerage.
Stud level production, everyone. If you were unsure, 60 loans at a time is basically, if Christian was a loan officer, he would be an Olympian. Well done, Christian. Thank you for carrying the torch the way you do. All right. Donald Trump was elected. He's got some plans. He's got some ideas. He's actually come forward and said what he plans on doing. That was something that kind of set him apart from his competition, where Kamala didn't seem like she had as much information about how she was going to tackle the economy. Donald Trump did. So we are going to start with an AP News article about his no tax pledges. We're going to talk about what he said, and then we're going to talk even more importantly about how that impacts people's ability to borrow. And then we'll get into where we think interest rates might be headed. You ready to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. It starts off with no tax on tips. In June, Trump announced his plan to exclude workers' tips from federal taxes, saying he got the idea from a waitress at his Las Vegas hotel.
You think that was the only thing they were talking about?
Yeah. I was going to say, why would he ever admit this with all of the...
That's very funny.
The stuff that comes up about him having inappropriate relationships with other women. But he did. He shot with it. He was honest. That's how Trump tends to do things. So talking to a waitress in Las Vegas, he says, to those hotel workers and people who get tips, you're going to be very happy because when I get to office, we're going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips, Trump said, adding, we're going to do that right away. First thing in office, Trump made the announcement in Nevada, a key battleground state with 6 electoral votes and home to the highest concentration of tipped workers in the country. Nevada has an average of 25.8 waiters and waitresses per 1,000 jobs. President Joe Biden won the state in 2020, but the Trump campaign hopes to put it in play this fall. All right, well, he's already done that. He's not specified whether he wants to exempt tips from just income taxes or from the payroll tax as well, which funds Medicare and Social Security. But that probably isn't going to matter for most people that are working in hospitality that collect tips. So as somebody who has to qualify somebody based on their income, this is something that you're familiar with. How will this affect people's ability to get financing?
Yeah, so this is super interesting. And even extending onto this, Trump also made similar claims about overtime. So when you consider just when people are making income on their typical W-2 jobs, when we look at it from a mortgage perspective, we look at the fixed amount that's like hourly or salary. If you're a waitress, you probably get something close to minimum wage for hourly. But then you also get a pretty substantial portion of your income. It could be either one of these, right? Tips or overtime, depending on your work schedule. And it's funny this happened in Nevada because if anybody's familiar with anybody in Las Vegas specifically, a lot of casinos, a lot of hotels, a lot of places where tips and overtime income could potentially be the vast, significance of your pay stub, right? I know, admittingly, right, I like to take a trip to Vegas every now and then, and I've actually spoken to a couple dealers, blackjack dealers, and they have mentioned dealers is a little weird of a thing to say.
Thank you
right?
for clarifying that.
Yeah, but they have let me know because I always get curious, right? I've done a couple loans for them, a couple of them are my buddies. And they've said, man, tips are, 70, 80% of our income sometimes, depending on, how busy that week or weekend was. So when you consider, some of these voters in those states thinking, hey, I'm not going to get taxed on 80% of my income, you could see how that could be such a significant claim, right? Now, there's a couple things to keep in mind here. There are other situations where tax-free income already exists. That's a lot of veteran service members, right? A lot of times disability is not taxed. A lot of times certain, VA entitlements aren't taxed. So there's already rules in place When we are qualifying somebody with non-taxable income, we do something in the mortgage industry called grossing up their income. And the easy way to think about this is, I'm just going to use a sample. I live in California, so does David for now. I know David's considering a move here in the future if you guys are following him. So as we look at, these potential income situations where there is non-taxable income on a pay stub, you can imagine you made $100,000, right? And I'm just going to imagine I'm in California, which I am. 50% of that goes away to taxes, right? Between federal and state income, depending on the tax bracket you're in. So really I netted 50,000. But imagine if that's not taxable, whether that's on the federal or the state level. Let's just, for simplicity here, wipe all of it. I made 100,000 instead of 50, right? Net, if there was no taxes taken out of that. So you can imagine every dollar earned tax-free is much more powerful in terms of how it can impact your finances than a taxed dollar, right? So when we qualify people with non-taxable income, we actually give them more credit, right, than what they do, than what we would do otherwise if it was taxable, because those dollars are more valuable. They go further. You keep more of them. So for instance, like a veteran getting a pay stub, of $2,000-$3,000 a month for disability that isn't subject to taxes, we actually gross that up by usually 125%. So they get an extra 25% of qualifying power from that money. Well, you guys can see where I'm going. If taxes, overtime, these more variable parts of your pay stub, where maybe it's how hard you work or how good you do. David, I know in your past you were a server. The good servers probably get tipped more, right? Mm-hmm. The good servers are probably working overtime more. Those are typically the more driven people on average. If you're not only making more money, but you're also making more tax-free money that we can give you a 25% bump for, you can see now these people that may qualify for $400,000 or $500,000 homes, that may start getting up to $600,000-$700,000 homes, because those dollars go a lot further, not just in terms of everyday normal life.
Right.
They go a lot further from qualifying, because we can credit you with more of that income. And that may be what gets people over that first-time home buyer hump a lot of times.
Right. So just to sum that up, if you would have normally been qualified for a $400,000 house, if you're not having your tips tax, that could bump you up to a $500,000 house on the exact same income.
It's very possible. Yeah. And obviously doing the numbers, get with the loan officer and make sure you qualify. But assuming this does go to a tax-free basis, 100%, it will have a very beneficial impact on people's qualifying for the subcategory of people who have this variable type income on their pay stubs.
All right. Good news there. If you work in a service industry, you might get a little bit more income. And even if you don't buy a house, you could still put some more money in your pocket. So I like the sound of that. Let's hope that they build more houses in Nevada, so we don't just have a whole bunch of people hit the market with more money fighting over the same amount of inventory and do nothing but push home prices higher.
There's the golden nugget there on Mortgage Mondays, guys. It doesn't matter how many buyers get into the market. If there's not houses selling, you got a real big imbalance there. And that's part of the reason why these last 5 years, all the pundits, all the experts predicted prices to come down, because rates were going up, but they weren't taking into account, hey, there's just not houses to buy, and there's still a big drive of people, but not necessarily houses to place them in. So supply is absolutely a huge driving factor in America's housing situation right now.
There you go. And I want to apologize to everybody listening. There is a picture on the screen of when my beard was a little bit longer and I couldn't get it off the screen.
And before all your tattoo removal surgery, right?
That's exactly right. Next up in Trump's plan, Social Security tax cuts. Trump has also pledged tax cuts for older Americans, posting on Truth Social, I believe that's his social media company, in July, that seniors should not pay taxes on Social Security. The challenge is that taxes on Social Security benefits help to pay for the program. So they actually tax you on the money that they're paying you and put the money that they tax back into the program to pay you more money to then tax it more. The loss of revenue could mean that Social Security would be unable to pay out its full benefits in 2033, 2 years ahead of the current estimate, which basically means that Social Security is set to run out of money in 2035. And if this change happens, it would be set to run out of money in 2033. I don't know how much that really matters in this whole game, because they just move money from one place to another most of the time. But if Trump doesn't tax Social Security, that means that the seniors that are collecting it would actually have more disposable income to go spend money. Christian, how often do you see people that are senior citizens qualifying to buy houses? And how much do you think this would have much more to do with just allowing them to have more money to spend and affecting the overall economy, but maybe not the housing market?
Yeah, it's funny. Social's always been a big hot topic of discussion, right? Because it's basically deferred compensation, right? You're deferring out your compensation during your working years to help subsidize your retirement years. And to answer your question, I think you'd be surprised. We don't see social on every application. But sometimes it's a kid helping their parents move to a new house. Sometimes it's vice versa, right? Their parents are giving a little bit more income to help their kids buy a first house. And more times than not, if their parent is retirement age, it's social, right? Social Security is there. And that is qualifying income, right? Absolutely. You can use Social Security to help you qualify to buy a house. Now, the claims of if it's going to go away or it's going to get more subsidies or, that's a whole different path that I don't think anybody really has a great answer for. I mean, that's why they're, it's still 10 years out of it potentially running out, but that's something to keep in mind. That's our retirement ages, right? I mean, in 10 years, we're going to be closer to those ages. Are we going to have Social Security? I don't know. We may not have anything. I don't know how that's going to work because we would have contributed to it. So you got some really weird political decisions that have to be made there. But yeah, just to answer your question, we absolutely do see Social Security. It's usable income just like any other dollar earned.
All right, moving on. This one might be a little bit more relevant. Overtime taxes. Trump has also said he would support legislation to eliminate taxes on overtime. That gives people more of an incentive to work. Trump said in September at a campaign rally in Tucson, Arizona, it gives the companies a lot, and it's a lot easier to get the people. I'm assuming this is in response to labor shortages, which you and I are experiencing at the One Brokerage. We are hiring experienced loan officers, by the way. If you're looking for a better place to hang your license and you're listening to this because you like the information that you get, you could be getting this every single day in our company. Send us an email at intake@the1brokerage if you would like to learn more about hanging your license and working in the best mortgage company in the country. We're fantastic. We're simply the best. There's no one better. They all say it. Trust me, everyone says it. You're not going to find a better place. Truly
tremendous loans. Tremendous loans.
Big league compensation. That's right. Tremendous loans. Thank you, Christian. So if we are no longer taxing overtime, what type of people would this apply to be able to get pre-approved to buy a better house?
Yeah, now this one's definitely really unique, mainly because I have some personal experience with this, with both of my parents being in the medical sector. My mom growing up was a registered nurse who hospitals have gotten very smart. And I think if this were to take place, this would probably be less significant than the tip alternative, mainly because from what I've seen, and this is only one part of the sector of employment in America, but companies are smart, right? Overtime very commonly is time and a half or maybe double time on holidays. And growing up, I used to always hear, whether you're on a 12-hour shift or an 8-hour shift, or you don't work X numbers in the week or X numbers in the month, there's all these different thresholds, that you have to surpass to qualify for overtime. And a lot of time the employer can kind of skirt a lot of the rules. Now, obviously, if you do actually earn it and the employer is happy to pay it, if same thing happens, it is untaxed income. Same copy and paste conversation that we just talked about with tips. It's going to help buyers. They're going to keep more of that money. We could potentially do the same gross up calculations. But I think maybe this is the cynic in me. I think companies are going to be smart and maybe pivot around, the hours that they give, knowing that those dollars are going to be so much more. Companies will realize, hey, you're keeping more of that, so we could potentially pay less of it. Just because that's been my experience. So I'm a little less bullish on the overtime compensation. I think the tip income on the flip side, though, could be very significant to a lot of different sectors in America.
All right. Well, we have another source of income that may be getting cut as well, corporate tax rates. So we're going to explain what corporate tax rates are in a second here, and then what it would mean if they were cut. He said he's going to cut the rates, cut the tax. He said, we are cutting the tax. We are cutting the rates. Cut the tax. Cut the rates. Little homage to the eating the cats and eating the dogs. Christian, did you even hear that? Like, I don't know that you even watch the news and hear memes, do you?
I did hear the they're eating the pets allegations.
Speaking of pets, that one's not being eaten. You want the mortgage mutt to come on here and share a little bit about what they think about this?
He did. It's funny, right? When you started saying they're eating the dogs, he did just bark up there. He must have heard that. But he's not being eaten. I can promise you that.
The mortgage mutt staunchly protesting the idea of being eaten, and we are here for it. Thank you, buddy. All right. So corporate tax rates, what does this mean? Well, first off, corporations are probably not what everybody thinks. While they are big companies like Apple and Google, they also apply to any individual that starts a business and elects to have it taxed as a corporation, usually a C corporation. So in general, you can have a limited liability corporation, an S corporation, or a C corporation. LLCs and S corps are what you call pass-through entities. And remember, I'm not a CPA, neither is Christian, so we're just speaking from our own experience, but we're not representing ourselves as professionals here. But a pass-through entity takes income that the corporation makes, passes it through to you personally, and you take deductions from there and pay on whatever is left. A C corporation is not a pass-through. So whatever profits or losses that company experiences, it doesn't pass through to you as a person where you can take extra write-offs. It stays within the company. You can only take write-offs that the company itself took. As a benefit to get more people to choose this type of election, they typically offer a lower rate for the money that is in the corporation, but it comes at a price. Because if you ever want to take money out of a C corporation, you get taxed on it again. So even though corporate tax rates tend to be lower, you pay more taxes on it because it gets taxed when it hits the corporation, and then it gets taxed again when you pay yourself a salary for it. So what happens is money tends to stay in corporations. As a way of trying to get it out, Trump has talked about lowering the corporate tax rate from 21% to 15%. And Christian, you may know better than me. I believe it was at 26% and then it was dropped to 21. Does that sound right?
I want to say, I think it was either 26 or 27. Yeah, it was in that ballpark. But in 2017, Trump did cut it down to, like you said, right now it's 21. And that was a big running point because Trump's tax cuts, I think, are set to expire in 2025. So a new tax legislation, I know Trump has won, but regardless of who was going to win, they were going to have new tax legislation on their hands. Absolutely.
Now, Harris wanted to raise that exact same rate up to 28%. That was at 21%. Trump is saying he wants to drop it to 15%. And here's the logic there. If you keep the corporate tax rate lower, corporations have more money that stays inside of their business, which they would presumably then use to go invest in new materials, new products, new machinery, or hire new people. And so that creates more jobs. And then that money goes to the government by way of income tax instead of the corporate tax rate. And I'm speaking for him now, but I believe his understanding of this are that corporations are entities that make things happen. So they're out there in business, in the environment, paying attention, hiring people, paying them decent salaries, growing, and he wants to get more growth going. Now, if this does occur and he drops it to 15%, how can we expect this to impact both the housing market and the individuals who are getting paid out of a corporation?
Yeah, well, I think number one, and just to correct myself earlier, it was 35, not 27 prior to Trump's tax cut, so even higher. So that was 14% drop. That's pretty big. To answer your question, though, David, corporations keeping more money. The gist of it, and Republicans run on this a lot. Trump runs on this a lot. Corporations keeping more money should drive more growth for the economy. That means they have more money to pay employees. That means there's a more, David uses the velocity of money. Okay. And like David has said in a lot of his, talks and recordings and everything, David talks about the velocity of money, right? If money goes to the state, or the government, it ends the velocity. It's no longer in the citizens' hands. It's no longer in company hands to go to employees or further development or further research. So the idea and why this is pushed for by a lot of, people on the right, they argue that if a company keeps more, it's not just to drive up the pocketbooks of the corporation. The idea is keep more money so that they can spend more money in the economy instead of sending it to the government. That's the ultimate goal, right? And like David said, when you elect to be taxed in the specific way, it doesn't go to individuals. It's not like this is a 35 to 21% cut for Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. This is for the money held and maintained in Tesla in this example, right? Or X or SpaceX or whatever, right? The company's actually being run as an entity that have their own balance sheets. The one brokerage is a good example, right? If we have more money retained in the one brokerage that we don't have to pay the government, we can pay our loan officers more. We can pay processors more. That puts more money into the economy. And you just look at that downstream. Now the loan officers are buying more houses, buying more goods, buying more services, buying more products. And that is stimulatory in nature, right? You're keeping more money in that velocity cycle, as David talks so much about.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You could either take it out of the company and give it to the government to spend, or you could keep it in the company. Then the company reinvests that into new people. Those people come in, they're more productive. They get taxed on what they produce on their income tax, and that goes to the government that way. So I don't know if it really matters what I think, but I like the idea of coming in here and creating incentive for people to work harder and make more money, because when taxes get too high, people respond by saying, fine, I'm not going to work at all. And then the government gets nothing. Now, rounding this thing out, we have his SALT plan and his tariffs plan. SALT is something that Trump said he would like to get it back. And you did a little bit of research on this. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, so SALT is an acronym. It stands for the state and local tax, which basically this was also implemented in this 2017 tax overhaul, so to speak. And this is where if you're paying state and local tax, so that could be property tax, sales tax, income tax, whatever taxes you're already paying for at the state level, you can actually take what's called a SALT deduction, which is you don't have to be taxed twice on something that you paid property tax on, right? We got the mortgage mutt back there messing around. Be sure to check out the mortgage mutt in the background, making sure you get a lowest rate on your mortgage. But regardless, though, this SALT deduction is beneficial once again, and this all is in the same mindset. You guys can see a trajectory here, right? Minimizing taxes on tips, that incentivizes good service. Minimizing taxes on overtime, that incentivizes working more, right? Minimizing taxes on corporations, that incentivizes corporations spending more. Minimizing taxes on SALT deductions, that minimizes how much you need to not only send to your state and local authority, but then you can use that as a write-off against what you send the federal government, right? So just for some calculations here, let's say you spent $15,000 combination of your sales tax, property tax in California. As it stands right now with the SALT deduction that was added, you can write off $10,000 of that. That's the cap right now. It's a $10,000 a year cap that you can deduct against your federal income taxes. So it's all in the same line of thinking. You're lowering the amount of money sent to the government. The counter for that is the government probably needs to get a little bit more efficient. That's really a big thing in the, in the news cycle right now. You hear of Elon Musk running the, Department of Government Efficiency, I think they're trying to call it, right?
Yeah. The Doge.
Yeah, the Doge,
DOG.
right? So they're basically saying if we send less money to the government, we don't want the government to run at more of a deficit. So let's make it more efficient, right? Let's collect more from our citizens and let's spend less as a government, which I think is good. We should probably be doing that instead of just, the blank checks that we write right now, right? And all of this is in the same line of thinking, right? Limiting the amount that you need to send, limiting the amount that you don't have control over, and keeping the money in the citizens with that velocity behind it to stimulate more growth, more drive, more spending in the market.
All right. And last, we have Trump's plan for tariffs. Trump basically wants to bring back manufacturing jobs from the overseas to America. And his plan to do that is to tax the imports that come from overseas at a higher rate, which makes them more expensive and more difficult to sell, which incentivizes companies to manufacture things in the United States where he's bringing jobs back here, which would create more income and theoretically create more demand for housing as more people can afford to pay it. What are your thoughts on if that does happen? Is that going to affect the mortgage industry much?
Yeah, so tariffs are a very hotly debated topic right now, and there's people on both sides that probably have some fair points. On one side, you have, hey, if services and products overseas that are imported into us are more expensive for the companies, they're just going to levy that onto the borrowers, or onto the buyers, right? So that's if Trump increases tariffs 50% on Nissan cars, right? That's a externally built product. The company's just going to offset that by increasing their cost by 50%. Well, the argument is if there is a way for the company to maybe get some stimulus or some incentives to build in America, they could avoid that tariff and also create American jobs, right? And obviously the balance is very delicate there. Now, something that hasn't really been spoken about very much, there's been hundreds, if not thousands, of successfully implemented tariffs in our country's history. It's not a new topic. I know Trump's running on it, but it's not like this brand new idea. We've been doing them. I mean, a really successful case study was all the way back in the 60s where we required a 25% tariff on all Toyota pickup trucks, right? The government at that time didn't like that Toyota was being built out of state. So they said, we're going to tariff you 25% to build just your pickup trucks. And what did Toyota do? They built a manufacturing plant in America, and they build all of their Toyota pickup trucks in America. And they avoid that 25% tariff. And that was a successfully implemented tariff. Now, there's been some that haven't gone as well. But the goal is that how people are treating this is that there's going to be 100% tariff on anything day one. If he does that, that's, in my opinion, the wrong move. What should be happening is you roll out, hey, you have 2 years to build an investment network in America, to build a manufacturing house, to build a plant, whatever, and we won't tariff you in the meantime if you've contributed, job creation in America. And this is the way now that we can get you around these potential tariffs. But if you choose to continue operating out of the country and taking advantage of the low cost of wages and selling into America, we're going to charge you a surplus for that, right? Which I don't think is a necessarily bad idea. It's a very delicate process. I think it should specifically be hard on American companies that choose to outsource employment. That I think should probably be punished, right? Where if you are built, owned, operated in America, you probably shouldn't have plants somewhere else just because it's lower cost of labor, and then sell your products back into America, right? Because if you want the American consumer, you should have the American manufacturers too, right? I think that's just kind of morally right and something that we can use tariffs to incentivize. And just to round this out, to speak about how that would potentially impact mortgage rates, if it doesn't get implemented correctly and does lead to an increase in cost of goods, it's just how all other inflation has impacted us. People have less money to spend. It's less easy to save for a down payment. It's harder to make your debt to income work. People go into more debt. It's ultimately a negative for the economy, right? So there's a good way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. I'm hoping it's in line with the good way.
And there you have it, folks. Trump's plan as we have it so far, summed up for your listening pleasure by The One Brokerage, with the cameo by the Mortgage Mutt. Christian, if people would like to get a hold of you, they're thinking about buying a house, they want a genius like you to help them with that process, where can they go?
Yeah, good way to find me on Instagram at The One Broker. You can slide into my DMs. That's the best way to get me. Otherwise, you can catch my email, christian@theonebrokerage.com. We'll link it below in the video description as well.
I highly recommend everybody here slides into Christian's DMs. He has a beautifully manicured beard that complements his wonderful head of hair, which I am frankly jealous of for obvious reasons. And you shouldn't miss the opportunity to connect with the guy because he's really good at what he does. He's also pretty fun and pretty funny. Remember, we'd like you to subscribe to the channel so you get notified anytime a new Mortgage Monday episode comes out. Next week, we're going to be talking more about Donald Trump and his plans for the economy, including what might happen with interest rates. So make sure that you stay tuned. If you've got a minute, check out another episode of The David Green Show, which you can find here on YouTube or Apple or Spotify if you're not subscribed. Check out theonebrokerage.com to learn more about our products, and you can learn more about yours truly at davidgreen24.com, or slide into my DMs on Instagram at davidgreen24, or follow me anywhere else on social media. Let us know in the comments. Are you heartbroken that Donald Trump was elected? Are you barely hanging on? Are you excited about where things are going? Are you concerned about where things are going? Let us know. Let us know what questions you have for us, and we will reach out if you leave us your contact info. Thanks, everybody. We know you could be getting your information from anywhere, and we truly appreciate that you get it here. We will see you next week on Mortgage Monday.